Mark Immelman, who you should also have in your podcast. He's works for CBS Sports. He's been an instructor. His brother obviously won the Masters. He first discovered me years ago, he's like, you're talking about things that are hiding in plain sight, and I think that's what a lot of what I like to uncover to people is like it was there all along. You just kind of had to pay attention to it and think about it in a different way.
Good morning, boys and girls. I'm Jonathan. To my left, or maybe your right, I got Robbie, and we've got a special guest coming up here in just a second. Welcome to the Whole Story Podcast. As usual, we're going to do a quick recap over the weekend. Not a whole lot going on in the world of golf since it's sort of the off season, but the LPGA had their May Bank, not their May Bach Championship, and Celine Bautier. I don't know if I said that right.
Boutier. She's won four
Bautier?
times, man. You need to figure it out by now.
I know she did win 4 times. I feel bad. I apologize, Celine. If you want to come on and shame me publicly, you can. We'll send out the invitation. She won a 9-hole playoff, which sounds crazy. Maybe John will help us learn how to be more focused in playoffs as well as we go through today. But as always, we're not here to talk about the professional golf world. We're here to talk about and hang out with our guests. So, Robbie, I'll let you introduce him.
Absolutely. Well, we are honored to have John Sherman joining us today. If you're on social media and you kind of follow the golf stuff, you have likely seen some pointers or tips from John. He does an excellent job of making, Jonathan, you and I were talking about this, making golf tips and getting better, more of a common sense thing. Hence the name of his handle on his social media, Practical Golf. But John Sherman, he's the author of 2 books, 101 Mistakes All Golfers Make, including myself and Jonathan, and his latest book, The 4 Foundations of Golf, How to Build a Game That Lasts a Lifetime. John, thanks for joining us on the Whole Story Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the kind introduction, and hopefully can help you guys and some of the listeners, and we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, so just briefly, give us a story of how you got into golf. I read a little bit of the intro of your book, and I think it all began at your grandmother's house, right? You found some clubs, you played everything else, and you're like, hey, let's give this a try.
Yeah, I was, like a lot of other kids growing up, I tried all types of sports. I love them all. And my grandmother in her house, I used to spend a lot of time there when I was younger, and there was an old set of golf clubs, like hickory shaft old, and there was a schoolyard across the street from her. So I remember taking some of the clubs and some of the old balls across the street and just kind of smacking the ball around. I remember very vividly ripping up a bunch of dead grass and making a makeshift tee, and then striking one really well. And as I put in the book, that kind of hooked me then, and I'm that's over 30 years ago, something like that, and I'm still chasing that feeling. So yeah, that's how I got started.
Aren't we all? I think most of us get that feeling on the last hole that if you might have played bad, but it's the one that'll get you coming back, right?
There's nothing better. I was having this conversation the other day with a friend when we were playing. I think the greatest feeling in golf is puring your irons. I love hitting long drives, but just hitting pure iron shots is what gives me the most satisfaction.
So did you begin your note taking of how to make people better at golf, like in your grandma's backyard, or did that come
No,
later?
no, pretty much I spent the next, I don't know, on and off the next 20 years getting good, getting crazy, making all kinds of mistakes. I think my earlier years in golf were kind of a cautionary tale, and a lot of the things that I talk about in the book or on social media, a lot of that's through observing other golfers and learning from coaches. But I'd say more than 50% of it has been my own personal mistakes, failures, whatever you want to call them, and taking a lot of time to reflect upon them and adjusting them. And in the last 10 years, kind of restarting my golf game and taking it to another level. So yeah, I think I spent a long time fighting against golf, is what I'd say, and fighting against myself. And a lot of what I've learned, I've tried and explain to other golfers, and hopefully some of it resonates with them. I think that's what coaching ultimately is, getting a message that resonates with people. So yeah, I'm a flawed golfer just like everyone else.
Yeah, I love in the book it says this isn't a book about the golf swing, right? You're not going to fix the golf swing. Maybe Jonathan, I'm sorry, he's not going to fix your golf swing, but I think, like you said, the lesson learned, uh, again, the practical, right, the common sense things that will make golf a little more enjoyable and help you get better at the same time.
Yeah, I try and point out things that in hindsight seem obvious, because they're not terribly complicated. But I think as we go through the game, especially even during a round, the first part of the book is about expectation management. And I talk about, stories of my own blunders in the game. I share a lot of stats, particularly the stats. People are like, whoa, I never stopped to actually think about that. And when you kind of internalize some of these things, it gives you a new outlook on the game. And the best part is it's not complicated. So, you know, it, that's what I think. Mark Immelman, who you should also have in your podcast, he's works for CBS Sports. He's been an instructor. His brother obviously won the Masters. When he first discovered me years ago, he's like, you're talking about things that are hiding in plain sight, and I think that's what a lot of what I like to uncover to people is like it was there all along. You just kind of had to pay attention to it and think about it in a different way.
So if I'm going to manage my expectations, my 200-yard shot shouldn't land 3 feet from the hole. Is that what you're saying? Is that like a good
No.
start?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at proximity stats, which are, helpful, there's some limitations to them, but just understanding that, even a tour player hitting it 40, 50 feet from the hole from 200 yards is a good outcome. And even for normal players, knowing that leaving yourself a straightforward chip or pitch shot, even if you don't hit the green, is a good shot. So it's kind of reframing all these results that we experience on the golf course, and sometimes we get angry at ourselves. And when you can kind of change your perspective on these outcomes and say, well, that actually was a good shot, it wasn't a bad shot, then that can have a kind of a snowball effect in terms of your how you select targets, how you're feeling about yourself on the course, your outlook. I think it can have a really profound impact on how you play the game if you have the right perspective. Whereas most golfers, and I did this for a very long time, default to this kind of endless self-criticism, and nothing's ever good enough. And that's a really hard way to play the game. And a lot of golfers play that way. And it's just hard to get better and enjoy yourself when you're just never excited or positive about anything that's occurring.
Yeah, Robin, I don't know if we found it from someone but we've decided we're not good enough to be angry. Like there's no reason. I would joke around with a guy at work. The worst case scenario is it's a Monday afternoon and we're playing golf. That's not a bad day, no matter what's going on.
Yeah, I had that realization when I was in my 20s. I didn't really play much, and I was an okay junior player. I was probably like a 3, 4, 5 handicap at my best, but I didn't get to play a lot in my 20s because I lived in New York City. So I would, play, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 times a year. And I remember this one round in particular, I was in Florida, and my dad never really played golf. I kind of got him to take it up later in life, but he arranged a game for me with some friends in Florida. And it was one of your typical Florida courses with water everywhere and, just nightmare waiting to happen. Florida golf's scary. And I remember just like, they'd heard, oh, this guy's a decent golfer. And I went out there and just played like absolute garbage. I lost like 10 balls. And I remember I'd lost my temper earlier in the round. And then we were kind of chatting afterwards with the husband and wife I played with. I went to the wife. I'm like, you know what? I said exactly what you said. I'm like, I'm not good enough to get angry at myself. I don't play. I don't practice. And I kind of had that realization at that part of my life that when I do get a chance to play, I'm just going to enjoy myself no matter what. I'm not putting in the right inputs to expect anything good on the output. And that's, a trap that a lot of golfers fall into. They just can't play or practice enough, and they expect too much of themselves. So I know what that feels like, and it's not pleasant.
You talked about the managing expectations, and you kind of hinted at it as well. Kind of another section of your book is kind of making those better strategic decisions, right? And so, if you're that golfer that doesn't get a chance to practice a ton, and you go out there and you kind of have to learn then to make better decisions. Instead of sitting on a 250, I'm going to go for it in a par five, right? Maybe it's okay to hit it a 180 and leave yourself a safer shot, right?
Yeah, I think it's situational. I try and give the rules that I've learned from some of, the top minds in the industry, someone like a Mark Brody. I think Mark, with his book, Every Shot Counts, which I believe every golfer should read, just understanding some basic rules about tee shots and approach shots. And I've made some different decisions on what I like to tell golfers. So for example, like you mentioned on a par five, yeah, I mean, if you were 250 away and there was water before the green, then I'd tell you, no, you've got to lay up. But, we now know, in Mark's book, he did a statistical analysis of tour players through 25 handicaps. And, the old, when I learned the game, there's like, oh, lay up to your favorite number. And he found that just get as close as you can to the hole,
Yeah, hit it as far as you can.
without taking on excessive risk. So if there was a water hazard before, or maybe a series of bunkers that you're trying to avoid, or a really deep rough, then you might want to lay up if you feel like you can't cover that number. But a lot of par fives, it's just a bunch of fairway and rough. And statistically speaking, most golfers are going to have a lower expected score from 30 yards than they would from 90 yards. So there's been a lot of stuff that I think we were told 20, 30, 40 years ago in the game. Some of it was right and some of it wasn't right. And I try and speak about those things, especially with strategy, because I think a lot of golfers had strategy backwards, and I did too. We're too conservative off the tee and too aggressive with their approach shots, and it's almost backwards of that. So I try and give the rules to people so that, yeah, if you don't get to play that much, or if you are playing enough, at least you have a basic set of rules that'll help you pick better targets and club selections. And that alone, I know from the response from the book, can lower handicaps significantly, is just by choosing smarter targets, having more commitment to those targets because you know the rules. So yeah, I think strategy is a great way to lower your scores without touching your swing at all. It's a way of making yourself efficient.
All I heard was grip it and rip it. Like he said, just go for it every time. So maybe that's why I need to work on my strategy. I
Well,
do
yeah, I
have
mean, you do want to, I mean, in a lot of instances, you do. Like, you do want to, based on how the whole layout is yeah, I want to hit my driver as much as possible. I want to hit it to par fives as close as I can, or on the green, or just before it. But if I have a tucked pin, or, I'm not going to grip it and rip it to that pin. I'm going to be aiming at the center of the green and taking more club. So there's a time to step on the gas pedal and there's a time to step on the brakes.
need to make sure I got to write that one down because the brakes don't work well for me. I have removed clubs from my bag just so I don't use them anymore because they're just bad clubs. Like I don't use my driver ever anymore. It's like let's just not do that.
One guy told me, he wasn't a very sharp guy, or I used to play with him while I was this older guy. He was a very cranky golfer, but he gave me this one, this one phrase came out of him. I'm like, wow, that was very, very brilliant. He said, "No enemies in the bag." So that always stuck with me. Now, I don't want you to take your driver out of the bag. I want you to practice with your driver and keep it in your bag.
Well, let's talk about practicing smarter because I hit like three driver shots and then they all go different directions. Like, let's just go back to my irons. They'll be straight. It'll work. So what would you say to a golfer? Because like most people, like you said, kind of in your 20s, you get to play every once in a while.
Yeah.
Practice is maybe acting like you're swinging a club in your office while you're not on camera and Zoom. So how do you practice smarter whenever you're as a most people getting out there maybe once a month to do something like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're someone, I talk about this in the book a bit, that the mixture between practice and play. And yeah, if you really are only playing once a month and you're maybe practicing once or twice a month, um, I hate to be negative and burst people's bubbles, but like that's not enough to expect, a radical breakthrough in your game. That's more of just like, I am participating in golf. And if you have the expectation that you're going to go out there and play 12 times a year and see a declining handicap, that might be asking too much of yourself. And I would say, well, I would just kind of be grateful that you're just out there in the first place and try and have a good time rather than worrying about the score so much.
Do you
So
know,
it's
do the number of
okay.
YouTube videos that you watch impact
Yeah,
that? Like
exactly.
Instagram clips?
Well, that's the trap a lot of people fall into, is that it's very easy to consume information, including my book. So I'll throw my hat into that ring too. It's very easy to watch, you know, 10 hours of YouTube videos a month on swing theory. You could read a book like mine, which is easy to understand. And I know this as a kid, it's saying like, oh, I absorbed all that information. It's like Neo in the Matrix when they downloaded all that info and they're like, oh, I'm ready to go. Like, this is part of my golf game now. And I give that warning in the book. I'm like, no, this is step one. It is learning some things that, you know, are good habits or decisions you can make on the course, or maybe some mental philosophies or practice methods. But then you got to go out and start trying them. And if you don't have enough repetitions, um, it's tough to expect for them to like become part of your game. So that is like the hardest part about golf, is because almost nobody can play as much as they want to. There's all types of commitments in life, you know, work, family stuff that get in the way of golf. So you really have to be honest with yourself and the amount of time you have to devote to the game and what you can expect in terms of improvement.
So all this kind of goes into another section of your book, practicing the mental game or sharpening the mental game, right? If we're going to manage expectations and not be frustrated because we don't play enough, if we're going to try to make better, smarter decisions out there and try to practice more, how then, or what do you say about the mental game side of things as it comes to, improving your golf?
Well, I think there's a few things you can do um, that can help you perform better from a mental standpoint. And I don't think they're terribly complicated or groundbreaking, but um, I do want golfers to have some type of process as they get over the ball. So at least taking some time to analyze their target, picking something out, going through some type of rehearsal, something you could do for 30 seconds before every shot and keep it somewhat the same, even in practice as well. But more importantly, I think the quest to have more emotional stability and enjoy yourself and be grateful for the experience. That was something I struggled with for a really long time. So I think at the minimum, if you approach getting to play golf from a perspective of, I get to do this is going to be fun. I'm going to be out there with my buddies. I'm going to be outside. If you can commit to reminding yourself of that several times throughout, I still do this even when I play in tournaments. I'm trying to devote some time to kind of soak in the experience, no matter how well or poorly I'm playing. And I think having that mindset can actually have like a strong impact on your mental game and your mood. So I try and give a number of methods that I've kind of figured out or learned over the years, whether that's, I compete in a lot of tournaments and I'm under a lot of pressure. And there's some things I've figured out in those circumstances, which I think can help someone playing in Nassau against their buddies on a Saturday. And a lot of that has to do with routines, has to do with being honest with your emotions and just understanding like it's okay to get upset. It's okay to get down on yourself. I don't expect someone to go out there for 4 or 5 hours and be perfectly positive. But if you do feel yourself losing your temper, getting impatient, there are ways to stop yourself and say, hey, what's going on here? Whether that's taking a moment to kind of do some breathing, chat with your friends. I think there's a number of ways that we can creatively divert our minds when they go to those negative places. And this goes for everyone. I work with a PGA Tour player, and this is a lot of the stuff we talk about. And it's the same type of stuff that bothers people when they play again with their buddies on a Saturday morning round. Is that we have 4 or 5, unfortunately, sometimes 6 hours on the golf course. And there's a lot of stuff that's going to occur up here that's not pleasant. And do you have some type of tool to redirect yourself to a more positive state of mind? And there's a number of ways to do that, and you get creative with that, and everyone's different. So that, I try and give those solutions in the book. Or even if you're listening to my podcast or on social media, I'm always trying to think of creative ways where people can redirect their minds, because I think the answer is different for everyone. We're not all the same in how we function on the course.
Yeah, I remember, in different sports, it's like don't let that one play beat you twice, right? So don't let the one bad shot affect the next one. And I've heard people say, you have from the time you hit the bad shot until you're ready to hit the next one to get over it. But I
Yeah.
also remember you talk about the mental side of things and kind of how you prep before each shot. I remember Louis Oosthuizen before the Open Championship he won, right? Didn't he have like a dot on his glove? Like he would look down and just kind of focus on that for a second. And then you think of like Jason Day when he was really playing well. He's playing well again now, but he kind of closed his eyes before every shot and focused. And then I think I even heard Max Homa, maybe it was on the no laying up thing or something, but he said, he's having fun, he's doing this, but that 30 seconds, like you said, before the shot, like he is focused on what he's got to do, the shot he's going to hit, and he's committed to that prior to ever stepping up to the ball.
Yeah, I think every great golfer, every great tournament golfer, and the challenge in that circumstance is a bit more difficult. They've all built what I would call like a mental cocoon, and there's tons of coaches who have different names for the same thing. Is that you could be strolling down the fairway, you see the PGA Tour players chatting with each other or whatever's going on. They get to the ball and they get into this zone. Um, and I feel the same way, but I'm playing competitively. Like when I get to my ball, it's time to go through the routine that I have gone through thousands of times, and every part of it has a purpose. It's not there just for show. It actually has some utility. So, for example, like my putting routine is incredibly well rehearsed. The way I read my putts, the way I get behind the ball, I take two strokes and I'm visualizing the speed of the putt. I am playing a song in my head. I align myself the same way. I take one last look at the target, and then the amount of time it takes me to initiate the putting stroke is almost identical. So this is something I can do all the time, and it gives me comfort. Whether I'm playing in, I was playing in the U.S. Mid-Am this year, which was a lot of pressure, or a club championship, or even a Saturday afternoon round with some friends. I try and do it the same way. It's not terribly difficult. It doesn't have to be amazingly intense. It's just kind of like this comforting thing that I do. But again, it's personal to me, and every piece of it has a purpose. And I think if you watch all types of top level golfers, they have these types of routine. I don't think it needs to be 2 minutes. You mentioned Jason Day. I don't want people going through Jason Day's routine on the golf course. I think it's too long for most golfers. But you know what? He won a major championship and got to first in the world, so it served him well. But again, he's facing a much taller task than the rest of us. So yeah, I think it's this place you can go to where you can forget about the last shot, hopefully, or not worry about the next hole or the final stretch. I always say golf is a battle between the past and the future. We're worrying about shots we hit, we're worrying about shots we haven't hit. And that routine is a time to initiate what we all talk about, is staying present and just trying to pick a good target and execute and live with the result after.
Do you have the same song run through your head every time?
It varies. I let music's really important to me. And I'll let certain songs come into my head. I think a lot of them have similar beats. They're on the slower side. And yeah, I've had my songs from my children stuck in my head in tournaments. So it's something that has given me a lot of comfort. I call it kind of like I think a lot of golf is a bit of like a walking meditation, where I'm just kind of out there and I'm like, if I'm not talking with a playing partner or something, I'm just kind of walking along, staring off into the distance around the putting green. I just kind of let music come into my head, and it just kind of like keeps me in a good place, and especially like as I go through a routine as well. That works well for me. It might not work well for someone else, but I think we can all find something that works. Like sometimes I'll visualize my kids smiling when I'm playing in a tournament. I just kind of let certain things come into my head that calm me down, or at least get me away, again, redirecting from those, oh crap, you just hit that last tee shot into the junk, or you just sculled that chip. again, finding creative ways to divert my mind away from that stuff.
See,
Jonathan,
Robbie,
when you hit a bad shot, go to Taylor Swift, Shake It Off.
no, I was wondering. As soon as you said a song, I'm like Black Betty, Wham a Lamb. I'm like, dude, if he's rocking out to that while he's trying to putt,
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit it. I've definitely had Taylor Swift stuck in my head on the golf course because it's been on the car and like on my wife's playlist with my daughter. Like it's, I'll fully admit to having Taylor Swift stuck in my head on the golf course.
this is
Hey.
why I've got the waggle and everything because I'm more comfortable as a baseball player. So it's like if I can get my feet moving and feel like I'm up to bat, then I can hit a ball a little bit better, maybe.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think that's a good example. Like if you have something that gave you a comfort in another sport
Yeah.
and it helps you initiate the swing and get you into that kind of reactionary state, like I think that's great.
So you had a tweet, I think it was yesterday. You said that that high single digit handicap. I shoot about an 85. I think at one point I might have had it down to a 7 or 8 handicap when I kept one, but I will have the days where it dips down into the 70s and then the days where it ticks up into the 90s. So I am one that you were talking about where it's such a roller coaster, but don't get to play enough. And like Jonathan said, and you've pointed out, like enjoy it while you're out there. And if the score creeps up because you got a couple blow up holes, then oh well, that's what it is. But I'm about that 85 mark, Jonathan. Probably around the 100, a little better than that. What kind of advice would you give to a couple guys like us that love playing the game? We keep saying it's more important about who you get to play with. We love the social aspect, the friends you get to hang out with, as opposed to scores. But yeah, it'd be great to knock a few strokes off. What kind of advice would you give to folks like us?
Yeah, I think, when you place the right things on a pedestal, which is having fun with your friends, grateful to be out there, like that's, if you can come off the course, whether you shot 100 or an 85 or a 78 and still have some type of positive feeling, like I got to play golf today, like that's a huge win. Like you're doing better than a lot of golfers. You're doing better than I did for a long time. In terms of, knocking the score down, I think, when I first started writing about golf almost a decade ago, and a lot of the stuff I was talking about at that time wasn't cool, wasn't fun. People are like, oh, that sounds great, but that's boring. Luckily, it's gotten cooler as the years have gone on. But I think aside from putting in a lot of work and getting lessons and going the practice route, a lot of essentially I wrote the book to knock down those, like find those 5 strokes. So it's a combination of, can you lose your temper a few less times? Can you pick, a few smarter targets, especially when you hit your drive in the trees and your mind speeding up and you see that opening and you're like, oh, I could thread it through there. If you just punched out and got the ball back to safety, that could save 2, 3, 4 strokes right there several times around. So I think it's a combination of, controlling your emotions. When things are, I think most strokes can be saved actually when you're playing poorly, because that's where they go very quickly. And it's almost identical to the feeling of being in a casino at the blackjack table or the poker table when you're on tilt and you start betting erratically when your pile's getting smaller and smaller and you're like, screw it. And that last $100 is gone. It evokes the same exact like thing in our brain, which is very unpleasant, where we get aggressive and wild. And I think having some presence of mind and patience to slow things down mentally, and again, choose the smarter targets if you learn some of the rules, that's where a lot of the strokes get saved, just simply by not giving up and not checking out and not losing your temper. That's hard to do, but if you want to be someone who's efficient with your scoring, like that's what you have to hang your hat on. There is the side of building your skills and your golf swing. That's how you get those major breakthroughs. And I'm all for that too, if you have the time and the drive. But yeah, for the golfer who's going to shoot a 95, like we can turn that 95 into an 89 just by doing a lot of those things.
We can turn a 95 into picking up and enjoying the rest of the day, even if you just shot a 10. I had a moment like that this summer. I was in England and I went out and played by myself, and jet lag in my body and borrowed clubs and I'm left-handed, so you never have the good clubs. And I got to like the 6th hole and the first 4 shots just like went away, like gone. So I was like, I'm just gonna go to the 150 mark and see if I still have a golf swing today. And I didn't. And I had two more holes. So I went to the next one. But the next hole was probably the best part of the day. It was a little par three, downhill, beautiful shot. And I still screwed it up. Like just terrible. Never even made it to the green. But it was a good day. You got to go play golf, right?
Yeah, listen, you got to play in England, you got to play another continent.
Yeah.
There's always something positive you can draw from things. And I think one of my biggest regrets is that I can't tell you how many rounds it was, but it's not an insignificant number that I walked away feeling like the day was a failure and a waste of time because I didn't shoot the score I wanted to. And worse, it wasn't even a score I was entitled to. So that if I can help golfers not do that, I'm the happiest. And that's hard to do in this game, but if you can find those moments where you experience some joy and just understood like, hey, I got out there, I got some exercise, I got to see a new golf course, whatever it is. Again, if you're playing golf, things aren't going that badly for you, but it can feel that way in the moment. It can feel like the whole universe is conspiring against you out there.
Yeah, not at all. Like you said, if you're playing golf, it's fun. Well, you're a good golfer, and we told you we love good golf stories, and that's what this is all about. We like bringing on folks and learning about what each of our guests do. But one question we ask everybody: what is your all-time greatest golf shot?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one.
I know good golfers
Um,
have a hard time because they have a
So many
lot.
to choose from.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I've had a good run the last few years. I would say in recent memory, I this summer I qualified for the U.S. Mid Amateur. I won medalist in my qualifier, which was something I never thought I'd be able to do, winning a USGA medal. And I got to play in the big show, as us competitive mid ams would call it. And I didn't play as well as I wanted to. We had a lot of weather delays. It was a new experience for me. But on the first day, we had one big weather delay, and then we got back on the course, and I got hot. And my last hole for the day, it was my 12th hole, but it was the third hole on the golf course. It was being played at uh, the venue was Sleepy Hollow, but we also played another course, Fenway, in the stroke qualifying to get into match play. And I started off tough, but by the end of that round, I got back to 1 over, which was a really good score in those circumstances, and just blasted my drive on a par five and had a really good number coming in. I think I had like 230 to the flag. And I just remember, like, I knew it was going to be the last hole of the day, and I had my hybrid out, and I'm like, I just stood over. I'm like, I'm going to smoke this thing. And I did. I just hit this like towering tight draw that landed on the perfect spot of the green and just careened like 8 feet away from the hole. And me and my caddy, who's a friend of mine, we just kind of had like a nice celebration. And there were some people watching from the USGA. And I was just like, that was, I didn't play as well as I wanted to in that tournament, but that hitting that shot, knowing what it meant and the pressure I was under, that was definitely, one of the best shots of my life. And earlier in that round on the second hole or third hole after a double and then bogey start on the same day, I'll put it equivalent. I was stuck in the trees and things were not going well. I had like 200 and I did have a nice opening. I'm world class at the low pull hook and I hit it to 2 feet. So on that day, I would say I hit, those two shots were ones I'll never forget as long as I live. Just knowing that I, hit those shots in a USGA event with a lot of pressure on me, it felt really good.
I don't want to completely ruin the story, but did you eagle out that hole?
No, I missed it. I power lipped out. But listen, I made it. The last 3 holes, I think I was 3 under on the last 4 holes, and that included like missing a putt on the prior hole by half an inch as well. So it could have been 5 under on the last. It was
So
close, but yeah.
That's a good way to
Playing
end.
smarter, playing practical golf, but also being good at golf helps as well. So
Yeah, but to be fully honest with you, the next day I came out after that weather delay, and things did not go well for me the next day. There was more rain, and I went from even par to 7 over par in the stretch of like 5 holes, waking up the next morning, and that's the way it goes. You know, I kind of had like that fairy tale feeling where I was like, oh, I'm playing great in a national event. And then the next day, I totally lost it. And that's golf. You know, in under 12 hours, I went from feeling incredibly confident to like, what's going on here? Um, and that's hard to deal with, but you know, that's the game.
that's
I
golf.
call that between hole 4 and 5. Like usually
Yeah.
about 5. Like I feel like I
It
know what I'm doing for the first 3 holes, and then all of a sudden the wheels come off somewhere, and then it's like, all right, let's just enjoy the day.
it's really incredible. Like, I don't care how good you get at this game, that can happen to you, you know, relative to your skill level. Happens to tour players, happens to guys at my level. Like, you know, you just go on a stretch and then all of a sudden, like you hit one shot and you're like, ugh, what was that? And then you just like lose your confidence. It just again, that's part of the game.
2 good golf shots to remember, though.
Yeah. No, that's the thing is like I think, you know, going away from that event, I wasn't, you know, the scores I shot, like I shot 78 and 81 or 82. Like those are not scores I wanted to shoot going into it. I wanted to play a lot better than that. Unfortunately, I didn't, but I can take away the memory of hitting those great shots under the pressure forever. So, you know, yes, I have some disappointment from it, but I also know that like I was there, I was confident for a while, and I hope to get back there. But that'll serve me for every other tournament I play forever because nothing will ever be as hard as what that was. That was a lot of pressure, and it was an uncharted territory for me. So, yeah, you try and do your best to kind of create this like mental Rolodex of great shots you've hit, and being proud of them, and then you can bring them out in the future.
Well, we always like to wrap up with what we call the quick 9. So we're going to ask you sort of rapid fire. You can elaborate as much as you like, or just one word
Sure.
answers are fine too. First one, what is the favorite course that you've played?
Oh, oh man, uh, I can't answer that.
While you're thinking, Sleepy Hollow might be the perfect Halloween course, right?
Yeah, it's not. I've been fortunate the last few years. Oh man, I think wow, it's probably a three-way tie between the old course, Fisher's Island, and Shinnecock. I can't decide between those three. I was fortunate enough to play all those in the last 2 years and some others, but yeah, those are all so special and many others. I actually I can't pick a favorite course. I literally can't do it.
Our
It's not
guests
a
get to
bad
make the
list.
rules, so you can do what you
Yeah.
want to do. So, uh, do you have one or a couple courses on the top of your bucket list?
Yeah, I've got a million. I mean, I'm fortunate, you know, living on Long Island, we have, you know, so many great courses, but I'd still, you know, I haven't played out in the San Francisco area, Pebble Beach, and all those courses. You know, I got to go to Scotland and play a lot of those courses last May. I'm desperate to go to Australia and play the Gold Coast there. Um, yeah, there's hundreds of courses I'd love to play. I don't know if I'll get to them all, but I'm trying my best.
All right. Which current pro golfer do you enjoy watching play the most?
I still I still love watching Jordan Spieth. You know, I was a big fan of his during his run, and I know he's had a rough, you know, go of it, but I really enjoy his style of golf, the roller coaster, the emotions, the wizardry. And I also respect, you know, I think he's got one of the sharpest mental games I've ever seen. Yeah, I've been a big Jordan Spieth fan for a while.
How awesome would it be if they just kept a mic on he and Greller, or and just everything they talked about? I mean, because
Or Mike has dealt with so much, and he just, you know, he just absorbs it all. He's
yeah,
that guy is a patience of a saint. He's
yep.
amazing.
All right, who would be in your dream foursome?
Uh, can we? This is just at any
Whoever,
time.
whoever you want to be in it.
Uh, it's got to be Tiger. It's got to be Ben Hogan, and it's got to be Jack Nicklaus.
Not a bad, not a bad way. Do you think you'd beat any of them?
No.
Okay. Favorite golf movie?
Happy Gilmore.
Nice.
Not even
Excellent.
close. Not even close.
All right, you've played some good courses. You have a bunch on the bucket list. Do you have a favorite course logo?
Ooh. I got to play a kind of one of these very exclusive rich guy courses down in Georgia called the Hoopy Match Club. It's a very cool place, and their logo is an onion because it used to be an onion farm, and I really like it because it's not like I'm not a big logo guy. I don't like showing them off, but it's like a lot of people don't know about this place. So I feel comfortable wearing it because I'm not gonna, it's not like it's a winged foot or something like
Yeah.
that.
And they're like, well, why do you have an onion on your shirt?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those
Don't
things
worry
where it's
about
like,
it.
maybe if you're like some golf architecture like enthusiast or you got to play it, only a small section of golfers would know what it is.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan being in Georgia, me in South Carolina, we haven't played it, but we know what you're talking about.
It's very cool. I
That's
will say
awesome.
that.
We'll add it to our list.
Rory's a founding member there. I was in it. I was playing shuffleboard next to his locker in the locker room.
All right. My favorite question that we always ask anyone, what's your favorite snack on the golf course?
I try and keep it healthy. In terms of snack, I mean, it's going to be very boring. It's probably banana, nuts. I eat PB and J's all the time if it's lunchtime.
I had tacos in Cabo and it changed my life.
One thing I will say, a quick story. When I was playing in the U.S. Mid Am, they like USGA just did unbelievable job feeding us, doing all these events. But on the first day, the buffet for lunch was tacos. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you're going to give a bunch of guys who are like incredibly nervous to play golf tacos? I was really scratching. I don't think it was the USGA's decision. I think it was the club's decision. It was a huge head scratcher for me.
You'd be pulling a John Rahm and saying we need more bathrooms out here.
Yeah, it was yeah, I don't like eating hot dogs or anything like that. I try and keep it like simple. And another favorite of mine, if it's the morning, I'll do like an egg on a bagel, something like that. I just, something with energy and dense
Yeah.
nutrients in it.
Yep. All right. So what's the best advice you can give to a golfer heading into the off season? I know, down here in South Carolina and Georgia, we typically get to play year round, but I know a lot of folks are hanging up the clubs. What advice would you give those that are hanging up the clubs for the off season?
Yeah, I mean, I would say don't hang up the clubs. I mean, if you have the opportunity to go to some type of facility and hit balls once or twice a month, just to keep things like a little, um, don't let it go away completely. I am a big proponent of fitness, and I think the off season is a great time to start lifting some weights. I try and preach about that, the benefits of resistance training, not just for general health, but for your golf game. Walking, I walk every day. I think it's a great time to commit to, as we're all aging and our bodies ache more. This is a way to reverse that aging process legitimately. I'm not making this up. I think if all golfers were engaged in some type of full body resistance training 2 to 3 times a week for 30 minutes, they would see profound changes in their body and their golf game. And more importantly, the less nagging injuries and aches they would have. And I can speak from personal experience. So my off season is kind of just started and I'm hitting the weights again. I think it's just a great idea for everyone.
Following health and fitness in the off season, last question is, what is your favorite Halloween candy?
Ooh. Oh, actually, this isn't hard at all. Sour Patch Kids.
Sour Patch Kids.
Addicted. Literally addicted.
Are those
Excellent
in your
choice.
bag?
No, they're not in my golf bag, but I
Okay.
will be stealing a profound amount of Sour Patch Kids from both of my kids in the coming days.
Dad tax.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
big time.
Well, John, it has been a pleasure and a very educational episode of the Whole Story Podcast. We appreciate you joining us and kind of giving us some knowledge. But to anyone that's listening, anyone that's watching, I can't recommend enough. Go out, and get a copy of John's books, both the 101 Mistakes All Golfers Make. We might be able to add a few to that list, but also the new book, Four Foundations of Golf, How to Build a Game That Lasts a Lifetime. And absolutely, go check out his website, practical-golf.com. You can sign up for a newsletter. I think it's weekly, if I'm correct. And then, of course, follow John on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, and all the other fun social media things out there, because daily, multiple times a day, giving great insight, comments, suggestions to everyone for how to enjoy golf more, how to be better at it, but yeah, how to make it more practical, right? So, John, we appreciate you joining us.
Robbie, Jonathan, thanks for having me on, and appreciate all the nice plugs you just gave me.
Absolutely. Well, we'll keep doing it. We will share this out as much as possible. But yeah, we appreciate it. For John and Jonathan, whose birthday is tomorrow, give a little plug for that. We appreciate you all listening to the Whole Story Podcast.